Good afternoon, hello, welcome, good morning, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. This is the latest from Hearts Standard. My name is Joel Skett and I'm delighted to be joined by Scott McIntosh. Scott, no game this weekend. What are your plans?
The plans are just, I wouldn't say I'm going to be avoiding football. I'll probably watch some of the Scottish Cup stuff and that, but I won't be sort of bending over backwards to watch anything live. I think I'll just catch up with highlights as it comes and maybe try and see a film, maybe try and go out for something to eat. And yeah, just try and unwind before it all sort of kicks off again. I think by the time it gets to Sunday night, Monday morning, all eyes will firmly be on what's going to happen on Tuesday night at Tynecastle.
Yeah, that's the big thing. I'm looking forward to a weekend off. Now that the Aberdeen Motherwell game has been postponed, the only game I was like really interested in was Steny Falkirk, but 7:30 on a Sunday evening. I was like, I'm rewatching Game of Thrones at the moment. I'm really getting back into it, so I don't know if I can pull myself away from that to watch that game. However, I do like the fact that even though we're not playing this weekend, we don't have to wait that long for the next game, and Tuesday will come around very, very quickly. As Beatbot Boot says, can't wait for the derby on Tuesday. Now, Scott and I are going to reflect on this past week and look ahead to next week. And of course, two massive games. We've got the derby, also got the trip to Ibrox a week on Sunday. So please do get your comments in, engage. I'll bring in as many as I can that are relevant and worthy throughout the video. And before we get into it, Heart Standard is sponsored by Campbell Muir. Campbell Muir is a premium search firm challenging the status quo in the UK and US insurance markets. Working with senior insurance professionals globally, they focus on placing elite talent into some of the world's top insurance brokerages. You can find them at www.campbell-muir.com. Right, Scott, a few days have passed since Tuesday. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think with each passing day, it gets better. I think the hope is always that you can get something like that out your system on the night or relatively shortly afterwards. Look, it's disappointing, and I don't think there's any harm in people talking about their frustration either with selection, player performances, decision-making during the game. I think that's all valid criticism. I think where the line needs to be probably drawn is when people start to question what's got us to the table in the first place in terms of being at that stage in February. So I think that there's a way of having a discussion about a game in isolation without the need to either write off players fully, write off a manager fully, or write off certain decision or tactical ideas that we've had throughout the season that have served us well as well. So I think that's where it can be a bit frustrating watching that go on into a 3, 4, 5 day sort of post-mortem. I think it's fine to talk about it. I just think we can do that without needing to throw anyone under the bus, because I think one thing we should all be agreeing on is that this team in general have earned our trust this season with the results that they've got and the way they've went about their business. So I think at this stage it's vital that we just stick with them until the end of the season. And then I think there does come a time where we need to have a proper conversation about how the squad evolves and in terms of how they approach games and having different options. I just don't think the time to have that discussion is probably now, given how important the running games are.
Yeah, that was something where you come at it from the same point as myself. I was kind of taken aback immediately after the game, or even during the game on Tuesday, with some of the reactions, some of the criticism, and then I had a night to think about it, rewatched the first 30 minutes, and it was like, I can completely get the frustration, and we'll come on to talk about the right-hand side and the frustration around that, but sometimes it just felt like, I don't know if it's the fact that because we've had so few disappointments, so few setbacks, especially in the league, that and the position that we're in, it's almost like it's like magnified, or just any kind of setbacks just seems to be intensified. But I don't know. Do you feel that's accurate, or do you think it's the same even if we're just gutting around trying to avoid being in the bottom six like last year?
No, I think that's a fair comment. I think there's also another couple of things that might be at play as well. I think, look, it's a football fan's prerogative to only worry about your style of play when you lose a game. It very rarely gets brought up when you're winning points. But if you lose a game, that tends to be the first thing that the fans start to question, even although we haven't really veered dramatically away from anything that's served us well in the majority of games this season. I think the second aspect is, and this is a difficult one because you want to be fully behind the team, but I think it's also fine to still be realistic. This team is punching above its weight. This is not what I would class on paper as being a championship winning side, but they're doing really well. A lot of things have came together for us in terms of the connection that McIntosh seems to have with the players they inherited, and then how well some of the new signings have integrated into it. But let's be honest, we're way ahead of schedule in terms of where even Tony Bloom was discussing the sort of future plans for the club back last summer. So I think there's an element of that as well. I think when you win games, you sometimes don't understand the limitations of your players. And then again, when it comes to discussing system and shape, that only really becomes a concern when you lose points, when in fact, I didn't see a lot on Tuesday that was much different from how we've approached games previously. I just think that when we've lost to Hibs and St Mirren recently, they've played us at our game very well, and we've not been able to match them in certain departments. Aberdeen game, I still think that's a game 9 times out of 10 we walk away at least a point, probably 3, because I actually still feel we played quite well that day. But the Hibs and St Mirren games are examples of when teams do to us as we've done to the Old Firm this season, which is get us rattled early on, win the second balls, and then potentially on Tuesday, the loss of 1 or 2 certain individuals definitely seemed to impact us more than it had done in recent weeks.
I would be interested because I'm sure I was listening to Derek McIntosh's broadcast. The press conference was today, and there'll be stuff coming out on Heart Standard on at 6 p.m. and some quite strong quotes from McIntosh. But he was listening to the broadcast. I'm sure he talked about felt that was maybe lacking intensity from 1 or 2. But it would have been interesting to see how we would have changed it. I'd imagine the way the first half was going, that there would have been maybe a 1 or 2 changes at halftime, just with and I would like interested to see how he would have shifted in that, just because having watched the game back, just made it so easy for St Mirren. It was like anytime the ball went sideways, they, especially on the left, they just focused on Hearts' left. Anytime the ball went sideways, they just went, right, let's press it, and it just forced Hearts back. And that was it was that where kind of mentioned it, and there was 2 or 3 options or times to play forward for what led to the first goal, and then it was playing into St Mirren's hand by going sideways and going backwards and allowing them to press and then step up, press and step up, and then that's where Stuart Finlay for the 3rd time with a red card got himself into a bit of a fankle. So yeah, there's frustration there. But in terms of like the bigger picture, how, before we get into I'll start asking you about the right hand side and your view on that debate, but how are you feeling in general about the prospects for the rest of the season following Tuesday's loss? Because it just felt like it was quite a big swing to, even though in reality it was just 3 points, but the swing of having that opportunity to go 9 points clear to then finishing on Wednesday 3 points clear.
Yeah, I get why there's a lot of disappointment. But what I would say is I still think there's plenty of twists to come, including for ourselves. I'm not saying we're going to have a perfect run of this over the next sort of 13, 14 games, but I also don't see Rangers and Celtic having that either. I still think there's significant chinks in the armour at both clubs that can be exploited by the right teams. So I do think we're still very much well in this. I think it's about navigating the next 2 games against Hibs and Rangers. If you come away from that with 4 points, however those 4 points appear, then we go into what's a more, I'm not going to say an easy run of games, because I don't think it is, but it is more winnable than, say, the last sort of batch of games that we've had, or should be a little bit easier for us to try and navigate. So I still think we're in a good place when you compare where we are to our challengers, and we've still got plenty of options coming back from injury. So yeah, I still think we're in a good place. So Tuesday was just one of those instances where we just got beat at our own game, and that's going to happen because we don't have a superb squad. We've got a good team, and we've got a good team that are doing well and complementing each other well, but we're not good enough to go months and months and months without having these adverse effects, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I was speaking to Mark, or I think it was Mark, on the back of your Scuffs Around the Funnel podcast on Monday, when you're talking about like the points, what points it could win the league, and you're talking about the number of games to win. And I think then you talked about defeats, and I think said don't no more than 5 defeats. I was like, there's no chance we're losing 5 games between now and the end of the season, especially a run ahead of the split after the Hibs and Rangers game, and then Tuesday happened. It's like, oh, it's down to 4 defeats now. There's been a big chip in that. But yeah, I'm like you. Craig asked me about this yesterday, how I'm feeling about it and how it's changed after the St game. It's not really changed. I think the next 2 games are the time where you can have a better judgment of the direction of this title race and where Hearts are in that title race. Before we get to talk about that, the week coming up, and I'll bring in some comments as well, because there's been quite a few and I've favouted some. But the right hand side debate. So at Tannadice, the 3-0 win, it was Altona with McIntosh kind of playing in ahead of him, tucked in off the right. Again, St Mirren, it was Steinvender with McIntosh again tucked in off the right. I wasn't surprised in the slightest by the starting lineup, and while it wouldn't be my pick for the right hand side, what's your general view on how Dennis McInnes is operating the right hand side, and also the view of the fans where they see a right back signed for a decent amount of money that's not playing consistently, and then there is guys playing out of position on the right?
Yeah. So first of all, in terms of Altona, who I do quite like the look of in terms of offering us more of a wing back option, maybe than a full back at times. I think he's looked okay going forwards in games. Certainly suspect at being able to close down wide men and stop any sort of delivery coming in for the wide left. And I think that's why there has been this chopping and changing between him, Steinvender and McAtee over the last few weeks. I personally thought Tuesday, once I rewatched the game, that the centre of midfield was our bigger issue rather than the issue down the right-hand side. I think one of the criticisms of McInnes that I think was probably more valid than most was that we seem to want to go direct. And he said that himself afterwards. He wanted us to play the ball forward and get it forward quickly and be quite direct and play it long. I think the problem with that is that when you look at how Leonard and Baningime were playing, they were relatively deep quite a bit in that first half. And because we were playing with a sort of 4-2-4, although McAtee was coming in and being narrow, we didn't really have anyone there to sort of win those second balls. So I think if he was to look back at how he approached the game, it probably needed a 4-3-3, and you probably needed either McAtee to play right in front of those two or Magnuson to play. So I think that's something he'll need to consider for future games, is if he wants to continue with that style of play, which I'm fine with, he needs to make sure that the individuals on the park complement that, because I do think Baningime and Leonard are probably a double pivot that you go for when you're expecting or want to have more control of the game. I think that's when those two would probably work. But in a game like that in Paisley, you know that's not going to work in terms of how high they press the game. So it's maybe something he'll need to consider. The right-hand side's been a problem. It's been a continuous problem. I don't think that's going to change much between now and the end of the season. One of the reasons for that is that, like for Tuesday, for example, I don't think there's any chance that Altona will start against Hibs. I just think, and look, people will naturally look at the 3-2 game at Easter Road and they'll talk about the first 2 goals coming for our right-hand side of the park and McAtee and Steinvender being poor in those moments. But I don't think the answer to that is to bring in a guy who has looked not comfortable at all in the defensive part of his game, either with long diagonals. If you watch Hibs, Barlasser's very comfortable playing long diagonals over the fullbacks. I don't think he's looked very comfortable with that. I think he obviously done okay against Dundee United, but you've got to add in the caveat that they only played, the first 20 minutes, 11 against 11. So that did allow him a bit more freedom down the right-hand side, which again, he done well in. I think McAtee or Steinvender will probably start right back on Tuesday, and I think that'll be the right decision, because Nicky Cadden only needs half a yard to whip a ball in, and that is probably going to be one of their main main weapons on Tuesday. So I do think you've got to go with one of those two. I wouldn't fancy Altona in that 1-1 battle, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's thing. Like, ideally, in the balance I would see, because I'm quite happy with Steinwender at right back, but I felt just like going back to Tuesday, I just feel personally that there's a better balance there if he's got a more attack-minded player on the right. And I know for a fact
that's where the 4-3-3 might have worked a bit better, though.
Yeah.
You know, you either bring Braga out wide right, or you even bring Kizaridis over from the left and play him on the right. And again, that would give you that option. I think that's where it's just those little tweaks. I just think centre of midfield is probably where we really lost the game on Tuesday, because that's where for that first half an hour, we just don't get a foothold on the game.
Yeah, and so on that, it goes back to notice that turned down to Craig at the game early on, and like Leonard was dropping into basically the left back position. Harry Milne was pushed on, and then there was a moment that actually kind of got away with it, and Beni did really well. But there was a moment where the St Mirren were pressing really high on Hart's left hand side, and then Beni and Mark Leonard were beside each other on the edge of the box with the ball, and it was just so kind of congested. Beni did well to open the game up. So yeah, I agree with that point. And then in terms of the balance on the right, I know for a fact Declan McIntosh wants to play with two out and out wingers, but it's the fact that Neil and Matto and Chesnikov are up to speed, and then I think Kajot is getting there in terms of what McIntosh wants from his winger. And so potentially you've got three options. I do think in time we'll see that. But at the moment, he's looking for a balance, and that balance has got Hearts to the top of the Scottish Premiership. I think ideally, ideally, Hearts would have signed Altona would be a right-sided Harry Milne, but there's not many Harry Milnes kicking about. And with Altona, he's certainly one with potential, but I think it also has to be understood that this is a guy who's had 6 months at right back at the second tier of the Netherlands, where there's not too much onus on defence.
This is where we need to discuss the transfer fee as well, because I think the transfer fee plays into the perception that the fans have about his status within the squad. I think Hearts now, under the current recruitment model, they will pay 500,000 to 800,000 quite easily for potential. It's not like it was where you were waiting every 10 to 15 years for Hearts to pay 800 grand on somebody. It's moved on for there, and I think that's something the fans need to maybe adjust to. I think Altena just now is a squad player, but I'm fully expecting that, because I don't think £800,000 within the realms of what we are looking to do over the next few years is actually as big an outlay as what it maybe has been in the past. So there maybe is an element of that where we will pay that sort of money now for potential on players. We'll pay six-figure fees for people. It won't mean that they'll come straight into the team and play every week. Like I say, I think he's got a place, but I think Hearts need to be controlling games more for Altena to have a bigger impact. I think those types of back and forths, I just don't really see what he brings to that type of match so far. And Borchgrevink had the same issue. So this is why we've had McAtee and Steinwender covering it right back, because McIntosh inherited Borchgrevink. That wasn't a McIntosh signing. That was somebody who was already done and dusted prior to his arrival. We've had an issue with him. I think even if he'd been fit, I don't think he would have been the option that McIntosh would have looked for in that system. And again, with Altona, I think his positives just now are what he can offer us going forward and from dead ball situations. I think that first half in Dundee, even the first 10, 15 minutes at Tannadice, I saw plenty of examples of players getting a yard on him. And it was happening too often. And I just think, given where Hibs are most likely going to concentrate the majority of their game on Tuesday, I just think you go steady and you go away. I would probably go with McAtee and I'd have Steinwender playing alongside him. I don't think McIntosh is going to do that. I think Frankie Kent's probably going to start. But if it was up to me, I would want legs and a bit of athleticism at the back, and I would have Steinwender and McAtee in there.
It's good. I did say favourite one says, do you think Kent is good enough and strong enough to step into Halkett's shoes? I think you've answered that question. And yeah, the Altona, I think two things he's got over Borchgrevink is that he stays fit and he's more of an athletic option in McIntosh's eyes. McKenna 40 says, too defensive, should have had our quality players on. We seem scared of what they could do when it should have been the other way around, referencing the St Mirren game. Danny Scott, as a fan base, we really need to keep the heat. I can't see it happening. No, if Rangers go ahead of us, I could well imagine things getting toxic, which is lunacy. Jambo Dead said, why did Dell take off Kazaridis so soon after the red? We pumped Midden previously with 10 men. I think he just wanted two guys who can... He wanted to play with two centre forwards, essentially, was his thinking behind that. To lead us on to the next bit, there's it. Carlos Arroyo 5675 says, we're about to start the best week of the year, if not the decade. We're leading the table, brackets historic, and we face Hibs and Rangers in 7 days. P.S. It's also Valentine's Day or something like that. So Valentine's Day is the day before the Rangers game. So you can spend time with your missus on the Saturday and then just be focused on the Rangers game on the Sunday. It's a massive week in the title race, Scott. How big is it, and what do you see? What do you like? Obviously, ideally, six points, and we're laughing and we're starting to think that this is definitely going to happen. But what are you kind of hoping for over the next 6 days from Tuesday?
First of all, a reaction from the St Mirren game. I'm quite confident we'll get that because we've seen it when we've, the previous couple of times where we've taken an adverse result. We've tended to bounce back pretty well from that. And I think the team, even the second half in Paisley, they defended pretty well for the most part. Obviously, the run up to the goal that we lose is disappointing in terms of some individual decision making and errors. But generally speaking, I thought the team dug in again, which they've done all season. So I've got no concerns about how we'll approach the next two games. And if you look at that Rangers game, these games against Rangers and Celtic have been our bread and butter this season because we've got a team that can rattle them. And I've still got confidence that we can do that, Ibrox. I know they've brought in a number of new players, but I still think those new players are gently getting up to speed with things. I think you look at somebody like Skov Olsen and you think he'll come onto a game, but when will he come onto a game? Is it going to be April time when it maybe doesn't matter so much? So, yeah, look, Rangers will fancy their chances because Rangers have had a good run of form. But I think if you look at that Hibs game against Rangers, there certainly can still be got at. And there's certainly still aspects to their play that I think we can exploit even without the likes of Shankland and Devlin in there. So I'm still just as confident as I would have been if we'd got 3 points against St Mirren, because I do think the St Mirren performance needs to be looked at in isolation away from the campaign as a whole. It was a game where a team just did our job better than we did. They just played us at our own game. And if that happens 2 or 3 times a season, I think we can live with that. And that is what's happened so far this season. It hasn't happened very often. And when it has, sometimes you've just got to go, well, it's just up to the players now to show that they can respond to that. And again, got no issues with that because they've done that up to this point.
So a couple of guys, Stuart Noble says 2 massive games coming up. I think we need at least 2 points. Andrew Forrester says it's a must at least 4 points or it's over. I disagree. I really disagree. I think winning on Tuesday is massive. I think that's massive. I think it's one of those where if you had a disastrous week, lose 2, and Rangers beat Motherwell, then the dynamic of the title race changes, and then that's the first time Hearts have been off the top spot since September, and then you're beginning to be the chasing team, and it's just a whole sort of different kind of pressure and questions be asked. But I do think that. I think we will win on Tuesday, and then it puts pressure on Rangers again. They go to Motherwell. Not many teams have won at Motherwell this season. If any teams won at Motherwell this season, and that's not a given. And then I think if you go, as long as beating Hibs on the Tuesday, I think there's an element of pressure that's off. Going to Ibrox, it's you go there. I'm not going to say a free hit, but you can go there knowing that even if you were to potentially lose, you could still be top of the league. And then you look at the run of fixtures between the Rangers after the Rangers game and the split. And in my view, again, just I don't know if I'm delusional or just really, really confident. I look at all those fixtures and think we'll win every single one of those games. And I do think that to win the league, a league-winning team goes and beats Kilmarnock away, Aberdeen at home, Falkirk at home, Livy away, Dundee at home, and then Motherwell at home as well, which is perhaps one of the tougher ones. But so basically, a long story short, I don't think it's a case of 4 points or bust.
Yeah, and I think as well. Now, look, I'm not saying I want this to be the case, but let's look at the worst case scenario where Hearts could be on the 15th of February. The worst case scenario for the club is that we're 3 points off the top.
Yeah,
with 11 games left to play, with those favourable runny fixtures that we've just discussed there.
And Old Firm play each other.
Yeah,
twice.
I think when you look at that in context, I don't think we can say that it's a write-off if we lose the next 2 games. Now, again, it would be a psychological issue that the team would need to try and overcome, and that would be a big job for them and for Derek McInnes. But I don't think we're at any sort of stage where we should be writing things off. Again, 4 points would be desirable, 6 points would be excellent. And that's just the way we've got to look at it. And again, there's enough evidence for this season to suggest that we can get those results. Hibs have their no shortage of injury issues to seek at their end. I've tried to watch bits and pieces of their game back against Dundee United, and even the most ardent of Hibs fans, I think, have been quite honest in saying that they got out of jail the other night. I think the right side of their defence with Paslak, who's similar type of profile to Altona, possibly, in which I think going forward, he was a good option for them, but defensively very suspect. And then the right-sided centre-half, who they've brought in for Copenhagen, got caught under quite a few balls in the air from set plays. Now, if you consider where we're at our strongest, and the fact that Hanley's out injured now for Hibs, that's definitely an area in which we can exploit them. So I do think the opportunity is there for Tuesday. Both teams have got their injury issues to seek, but I still think we've got a good squad and a good first 11 that we can pick from. But yeah, going back to the original point, I think when you look at even from a worst case scenario, we'd be in the middle of February, only 3 points off the top. I think we need to try and remind ourselves of how far we've come in a short space of time. And that's why we should be sticking with this squad. As I've said at the start of the show, top of the show, there is definitely a long-term evolution of the squad/team that needs to be discussed, and whether that includes or doesn't include Derek McInnes, I still think there's elements that will need to be discussed in terms of what he can do to evolve us from the style of play we've had into something different that can maybe accommodate Aju in midfield, for example, Altona at right back. I just don't think it's going to happen over the next few weeks. It's really imperative that we stick with what's served us well.
Yeah,
there's minor tweaks you can make, like I mentioned about the St Mirren game. Maybe consider Beni and Leonard being a bit too similar in their profile, and maybe if you're wanting to go back to front, you maybe need to have a free that has maybe McAtee and Magnuson in there, because they're more adept at winning those second balls further up the park in Cammie's absence. So still plenty to look forward to. And by the time, I think, to be fair to the fans, I think by the time we get to Monday and Tuesday, I think they'll start looking at it that way. It's maybe still a little bit raw because we're only 3 days past the St Mirren game. And being unhappy with a result is still good if you can get that balance and act right, because we've moaned for years about there being a bit of an acceptance culture at the club, and we don't want to slide back into that scenario. But also, I think you don't need to be too knee-jerk, and it doesn't need to be the end of players. Like, I saw people writing off Beni Baningime because he had a goal on Tuesday. It's just like, have you been here for the rest of the season? I just don't think it needs to go to that level.
No, absolutely. I think there is. It's a balance, and there needs to be standards, and especially with the ambition the club have now, the expectation and those demands, and the raise, and the team will need to raise with them. I agree. I think when you talk about the evolution of a squad, I think the squad come the start of next season will look very, very different to what is just now. Quickly on Hibs, Paslak, I watched him and I thought, Milne and Kazarides could have a field day down the left-hand side.
I've seen the reports of him in Germany as well, so that wasn't a surprise to me how he fared in that game. And they're going to be missing McGrath, who's been a really good, solid signing for them, along with Mulligan. They'll
bang it. They'll
got options up front. I think Scarlett will be dangerous for them, but
he looks good.
Plenty there that we can take advantage of, I think.
Yeah, I think they'll come. I think they'll play the same way. They'll pop it long and try and play off Scarlett and the two fast players either side of him, in Boyle and Johan. Hanley, I think he will be a bit of a miss because he was excellent at the last time they played at Tynecastle. Him and Halkett were arguably the best players on the pitch. Halkett, of course, will be without, and Andrew Forrester says, I know Halkett for 2 massive games. It's only one. He's back for the Rangers game, so it's only 1 game he will miss. Scott, you mentioned Beni there. We'll just finish up on Beni Baningime and his comments during the week saying that he has had conversations with the club regarding a new deal, and then Derek McIntosh said today at the broadcast media that's like that Beni knows how he feels about him, and he's got a big part to play. And it did when I put the story out yesterday. I was quite taken aback by some of the comments where it was only a few weeks ago where I was seeing loads and loads like, you need to get Beni on a new deal, you need to get Beni on a new deal. And now I'm saying I'd be nothing more than a squad player, time to move on from, etc., etc. What did you make of Beni's comments and the thought of a new deal?
Well, I think firstly, if there is people that just view him as a squad player, I'd rather have him as my periphery squad player than, say, Callum Neuenhoff. So that, look, even if you're looking to maybe dismiss him as a first-team pick moving forward, which is fine because, as we've mentioned now, the team will evolve. The whole point in this season, whole point in this season and Derek McIntosh coming in was having a manager who could transition us in a gradual process from the legacy squad over to the Jamestown team. And if you've seen the majority of the team that finished the game at Tannadice the other night, there was maybe only one legacy player left on the park, which was Halkett. I think everyone else was pretty much a Jamestown signing. So we are slowly moving towards that. And I think because of that, Beni might not be a first pick moving forward, but he's 27. I think it would be a good opportunity to tie him down for another 2 or 3 years. I think it brings a bit of continuity to the squad because even although there's going to be this sort of quite vast turnover year to year, I still think even you see it with teams like Brighton, they still have a little sort of gathering of players that present somewhat of a continuity to the squad, even if they're maybe not playing every week. So I think Baningime has the profile of that type of player. Halkett, obviously we've signed him long term. Finlay and Shanklin, those types of characters, they're the ones you maybe look at and go, well, as we progress forward, they might not play every week, but they would still be good options and good characters to have in and around the club as well. He's a very popular player amongst the other players, Beni, and he's 27, so he's still at a good age as well. The question's maybe not so much do Hearts want to keep him. It could be, does he want to stay if he has told something along those lines of, you know, you might not be that first pick every week. You might be a bit more of a squad option. That's when he might want to evaluate the fact that he's been here 5 years. He might want to maybe have a proper crack down south and maybe try and sign for a championship or a League One side. So, yeah, I still think there'll be a long way to go in that one. I don't think there'll be a sort of resolution to that sort of question for another sort of few months yet. That one could go right to the wire, but I'd be happy to see him stay. I just think, like most things, it's just a case of finding a spot for him within the squad whilst we're trying to change a few things at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. Sam asked me on Twitter. Apologies, Sam, I've not got back to you yet. It's on my to-do list about what it meant on. Does that mean that Jamestown have changed their view on Beni? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But my view was always like you. I think with Beni and Cammy both out of contract at the end of the season, I thought you'd need to keep one, at least one, to for that continuity, for what they do and give you in the midfield when it comes to the Scottish football midfield. And if Cammy Devlin, there's not been any update on his side of things, but if he was to leave, then I always thought that he would just pivot and keep Beni for that continuity. I think he's more than a squad player this season, but yes, as it evolves, having him, if he's a squad player, it tells you how far this team have progressed.
Exactly. I'd rather have him on the periphery than Sander Khartoum or Callum Neuenhoff. That's what I mean. It doesn't have to be this binary thing of keep or dismiss. It's just a case of things evolving and players who were maybe once considered first team picks maybe sliding down the pecking order slightly because we get the recruitment model right and we find ourselves strengthening year on year and being able to spend a bit more money on our recruits as well. You could say the same about Kazanides and Braga. They've been excellent this season, but ultimately they were signed to be involved in a a chase for Europe.
Yeah.
So the plan will be that this summer and next January, we will be looking to improve on those players. We won't be looking to hang on to them for 2-3 years. We'll be looking to move the Kizzaridis, especially. I think, given we've brought in Matto and McPakes in the door in the summer, I think there's definitely a feeling that Kizzaridis will be away in the summer. So I think, again, it comes down to us all needing to adjust slightly with it. I mean, football's been like this for a while anyway, where it's been revolving door policy come the summer. But we have had a nucleus of guys that have stuck around that sort of 5-6 year spell and been good servants. But it is now coming to a stage where they will slowly be phased out one way or another. And that's only a good thing. If we're bringing in somebody who's better than Beni and Cammy, it means that we're on an upward trajectory and we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there will be short of interest in Kizzaridis this summer, that's for sure. Just finish up with a few questions. James Govan says, how far away realistically are Chesney and Matto from starting games? He adds you into that as well. I would say, just look at the schedule coming up. I can't see them starting against Hibs. I can't see them starting at Ibrox. But then you get into games where you're home at Falkirk, home at Aberdeen, and I think it's that stretch of games between now and the split, between after the Rangers game and the split, where we'll start to see these players starting and playing every week, and then by the time you get into the split, hopefully Hearts are very much in the title race. They could be really big players in these big games where they've had that period where they've now got themselves fit to the point where McIntosh wants them fit, and they've actually played and experienced Scottish football, and they're ready to properly go. And you want that when you get into the split in these massive games. Scott was going to ask you this one very quickly. What was your take on the non-red card for Tavernier on Wednesday night? Have you seen it?
What was this one again? So is this to do with the penalty that they got?
No, it was John Jules. They played through the ball.
Right.
Tavernier was on, and he kind of it looked like he had his hand round him and tugged him down. But
I'm going to be honest, I'm going to have to plead the fifth on that because I haven't actually watched that clip back, so it's not something I can pass any comment on. I pretty much switched that game off once Rangers got that penalty in the further fourth minute.
That's what
I was in no mood to watch them sort of canter onto like a 4 or 5 goal victory. So I'm afraid I haven't seen that one back.
I did the same. As soon as Tavernier's penalty hit the back there, it's like, right, I'll watch because Craig was watching the Hibs game, so I thought I'll go watch the Livy Falkirk game. Falkirk were brilliant to watch. But also, just when you're talking about Rangers, is that should be noted that Rangers, I think they might have been booed off at half time. And Danny Rowe had to come out and say, what are you doing? And it just shows you that Rangers are still in a bit of a period where they're not that great.
You've got to remember as well, Rangers, and when I say historically, I'm meaning more over the last sort of 7 or 8 years since they came back up through the leagues. Rangers don't have a great track record of leading the pack. They're quite good when they're in the hunt, and at this position, the fans are on side with them. But as it gets closer and closer, and you get all these 6-pointer games and that, it'll be interesting to see the psychology of that Rangers team and the sort of makeup of that Rangers team. I'm still not convinced. And I've said this before, still stick by it. I still think in terms of how the players complement each other and play for each other, I still think we've still got something that Celtic and Rangers don't have in their squads just now. Away from the discussion around individual quality and stature and CVs, I still think we've got something on them when it comes to that.
Roddy Forfer says, agree with Benny. I don't think he wants to go anywhere. He will find it hard elsewhere for his history of injuries. Think Devlin will go, but again, he's developed really well under McIntosh. It would be the same under another manager. And just a couple of random ones. Brian O'Rourke says, what season of Game of Thrones are you at? I am just starting season 3. This is my second watch of Game of Thrones. And Beat What Boo says, House of Dragons is brilliant as well. So is Night of the Seven.
Just finish Game of Thrones once you get to the end of 4.
Yeah, I know. I get it. I remember it tails off.
Don't watch past 4.
But I did hear, I've heard really good things about House of Dragon as well. So looking forward to getting into that. And we'll leave it on this one. John Ross Campbell says, I'm never usually optimistic about anything, but in my 46 years on this planet, I've never been as confident in Hearts. If I'm deluded, then at least I'm happy. So, yes, we may have lost to St Mirren on Tuesday, but next week is massive. And what a situation to be in. Home at Hibs, away to Rangers, 3 points clear at the top of the Scottish Premiership. Bring it on. We'll be back on Monday. Craig and I look ahead to the Hibs game. I think you're back on Sunday with Mark and Scarce Around the Funnel to
yep, I think so.
Sunday.
I think so.
So be sure to listen to that. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're closing on 5,000 subscribers. Check out heartstandard.co.uk. There'll be stuff going up. Well, in 18 minutes, I need to finish it actually, from Dennis McInnes' press conference today, and there'll be stuff across the weekend. I hope everyone does have a wonderful Heartsless weekend and get ready for the derby on Tuesday. Goodbye.